The sky hung low and pewter-colored over the town of Alder Creek, like it wanted to spit, but hadn't the strength. Dust blew in tired circles, clinging to hems and lashes, and a crooked cross mounted on the church roof. Beneath it all stood Eleanor Dunn, broad-shouldered, full-hipped, in a patched calico dress a shade too tight. Her face bore no blush, no protest. Only the quiet resolve of someone who knew the world, had made up its mind long ago. She stood on the edge of the platform outside the trading post, where crates of dried beans and rusted farm tools were stacked like offerings. Before her gathered the town, men with idle hands and women with clenched mouths, children with the unkind gaze of their fathers. Somewhere near the front, her younger sister, Abigail, held their mother's hand and looked away. Her other sister, Lorna, the prettier one, always, the one they'd all fawned over since birth, smirked under her bonnet like this was theater. The auction had no paper, no gavel, just her father, Arnold Dunn, standing with his shirt untucked and breath stinking of whiskey and boiled cabbage, announcing to the crowd that, for the relief of certain debts and with regret of God's will, he was offering Eleanor to any man with something useful to trade. A few men chuckled. One spat. A voice in the back muttered, "I'd give a hog if she don't crush it first." The laughter rose like smoke, thick and mean. Eleanor didn't flinch. Her eyes remained fixed on the horizon beyond the rail fences, where the fields died into dust and the prairie whispered promises to those strong enough to leave. Her father cleared his throat, cheeks blotched red with shame or liquor. It was hard to tell. Come now. She's a strong woman, knows how to mend, tend, chop wood when needed. You'll never want for food or quiet. No one moved, not until the sound of hoofbeats broke through the stillness, like a flint striking stone. The man who approached was dark as wet earth, wrapped in a hide coat with beadwork at the cuffs. He rode a paint horse with war scars across its chest. His face was stone, not cruel, not soft, just unreadable. The silence bent around him. Men straightened. Women clutched shawls tighter. Tejano, half Comanche, half Mexican, and unwanted by both. He lived out near Red Clay Ridge, where hawks wheeled and no law dared chase. He traded furs and salt, sometimes came to town for ammunition, never lingered. Now he dismounted with deliberate grace, walked up to Arnold Dunn, and said in a voice that rolled like distant thunder, "I'll take her." No bargaining. No questions. Just that. Arnold blinked, caught between fear and relief. You got something to offer?" Tejano tossed down a sack of dry tobacco and a skin of something dark and strong-smelling. "That should clear your store's ledger." And the insult of this farce. The townsfolk didn't laugh now. They watched, uncertain, as Arnold nodded and backed away from his daughter like she were already gone. Eleanor looked at Tejano then, finally meeting the eyes of the man who had bought her. He said nothing, only gave a slight nod, like acknowledging a storm on the horizon. She stepped down from the platform, the wood creaking beneath her weight, and followed him to horse without a word. No one stopped her, not her mother, still dabbing eyes with a handkerchief, not Lorna, who watched with parted lips, as though disappointed the punchline never came. They rode without speaking. The town faded behind them like something imagined, dust, noise, cruelty fading in the orange wash of late afternoon. A jackrabbit darted across the trail, startled by their passing. Birds circled overhead, cawing low and hollow. After miles of silence, Eleanor finally spoke. "You didn't ask my name." Tejano didn't glance at her. "You already have one." She almost smiled. It had been years since someone didn't try to rename her. Big Ellie Ox, mule woman. At home, she'd been more body than soul. Out here, she was air and motion, sweat and weight beneath sky. "Why did you take me?" she asked, quieter now. He looked ahead, because no one else did. She waited, but nothing followed. No softening, no clever words. Just that. And yet, it wasn't pity in his tone. It wasn't charity. It was something else. Like he'd simply seen a thing discarded and knew its value wasn't for others to decide. By the time they reached his camp, just a fire pit ringed in stone and a lean-to of stretched canvas. The sun had bled into the hills, and the coyotes had begun their mourning. Tejano gave her a blanket and gestured to the fire. "Rest." She sat stiffly, the ground unfamiliar beneath her weight. He didn't undress or crowd her, just lay a few paces away, back turned, one hand on the knife at his belt. She lay there watching the stars for a long time. They blinked above the blackness like eyes she couldn't name, witnesses maybe, gods older than the ones from church sermons. For once, they did not seem to mock her. Eleanor's body ached, not from riding, but from years of holding herself too tight. Tonight, she let it go, just a little. The wind swept through the camp, carrying the smell of cedar and distant rain. And for the first time since girlhood, she didn't feel small inside her skin. She felt like land, unloved maybe, but wide, endless, and impossible to tame. The days unfolded in slow, sunburned hours. Heat pressed down like a hand, and the plain stretched wide and empty, save for the scratch of grass, the creak of saddle leather, and the brief, sharp cry of hawks circling above. Eleanor rode beside Tahano in silence, her hands blistered from holding the reins, thighs sore from the saddle, but she never complained. There was no one to listen, and she doubted he would offer comfort even if she did. She had expected cruelty, or worse, possession. But Tahano barely looked at her, never touched her, didn't demand her service or attention. He treated her as something between guest and stranger, offering her food when he cooked, space when he camped. There was a stillness in him, like stone, watchful, grounded, unmoved by the opinions of men. Each evening, they stopped near some lonely bend of land by a stream or under a dry bluff, and he would start a fire while she gathered kindling or cleaned their pots. She had never known this kind of quiet cooperation. Back home, everything was noise, laughter at her expense, barked orders, the shuffling pity of church women who wouldn't look her in the eye. Here, there was only the crackle of fire and breath and wind. Tahano spoke little, but what he did say mattered. On the third night, he asked her, "You ever ride beyond your town?" She shook her head, never had reason. He nodded like that was answer enough. Later, he told her stories. Not full ones, just fragments. A mountain where his mother was born, a white man who tried to shoot him once for speaking Comanche, a winter where he ate moss to survive. She never asked if they were true. Truth had stopped being a luxury the day her father bartered her like sacks of feed. On the fifth day, they reached the edge of a shallow valley nestled in dry hills, where a small camp had been made. Hide tents, fire pits, a corral with a few thin horses and one mule. Children ran barefoot, and women stirred pots or sharpened knives. The moment Eleanor followed Tahano into the camp, the air changed. Eyes turned. Conversations paused. One of the children stopped mid-run, staring at her with a kind of innocent suspicion. Tahano dismounted, nodded to an elder near the largest tent, then gestured for her to do the same. She climbed down awkwardly, legs stiff. As she stood there, a woman no older than herself approached, face half covered by a blue scarf. The woman looked Eleanor up and down, no smile, no scorn, just appraisal. "She yours?" the woman asked in clipped English. "She's not owned," Tahano replied. The woman looked again, this time with something closer to curiosity. "Then what is she?" Tahano's voice was even. "Bride." Eleanor didn't move, didn't speak. Her stomach twisted, not at the word, but at how strange it sounded. No one had called her that before. Certainly not with weight behind it. Later that night, she helped dig a pit for the cooking stones. No one asked her to, but she didn't want to be seen as something carried. She lifted rocks with bare hands, her palms bleeding by the third. A boy of about 10 watched her for a long time, then ran off. At dusk, when a goat gave birth early and the mother began bleeding out, it was Eleanor who stepped forward. She had helped with births before, calves, hogs, even her cousin's baby back when she was 15. The process was different, but the pain was familiar. With hands stained and sleeves rolled, she worked until the kid came free, slick and shaking. The women gathered closer then, whispering. One pressed a cloth into Eleanor's hand. Another brought water. Tahano said nothing. But that night by the fire, he handed her a small pouch. Inside was a ring carved from red stone, rough but beautiful in its imperfection. She turned it in her fingers, unsure. "It's not a token," he said. It's a weight for balance. She slid it onto her finger. It fit. The days after passed with something like rhythm. She wasn't spoken often, but eyes grew softer. A young girl with a crooked braid sat beside her during breakfast. The boy who had watched her dig handed her a rabbit charm carved from bone. She began to feel not welcomed exactly, but seen. One night, as they watched the fire together, Tahano asked, "Why didn't you fight it? Being given away?" She didn't answer for a long time. Then, "Because I was already gone before he gave me. At least now I can leave with my own feet." He nodded like he understood that too well. The air shifted after that. They didn't touch. Not yet. But she began to read the angles of his silence. The way he always camped between her and the wind. The way he passed her the driest blanket. Not gestures of affection, but something quieter, something older. That same night, he told her his mother had died between tongues. Forgotten by the Comanche, hunted by the settlers. She used to say she spoke 2 languages, but no one ever listened in either. Eleanor's voice cracked when she said, "I know what that feels like." For a moment, they simply sat in the dark, fire popping, coyotes calling in the distance like ghosts lost in the hills. She felt it then, not safety, exactly, but anchoring, as if her body, long tree-like excess, finally had gravity. They watched stars burn across the sky, like old stories being rewritten, and though no promises passed between them, Eleanor began to think she could stay, not because she had nowhere to go, but because she had finally begun to belong. The storm came in without warning, not from the sky, but on horseback. Eleanor was carrying a pail of water from the creek when she heard the hooves, sharp, fast, wrong. Not the loping gait of her people, but something desperate and mean. She froze, breath caught in her throat, then turned to see Tahano standing at the ridge, hand on the rifle slung over his back, eyes fixed on the horizon. 4 riders, dust rising behind them like smoke from a burning house. White men in trail-worn coats, guns at their hips, hunger in their eyes. Eleanor moved without needing to be told. She dropped the pail and strode toward the lean-to where the children were playing, ushering them back toward the main tent. Her body moved with purpose, not panic. The old version of her, the one who let shame weigh her down like a stone, was gone. This version understood danger the way wild things do. Instinct first, questions later. The men didn't ride into camp, not fully. They stopped at the perimeter, just close enough to be heard. One of them dismounted. He was older, with a beard streaked gray and a revolver too clean for the rest of him. He spat in the dust and called out, "Looking for a half-breed who calls himself Tahano." Silence fell. Even the wind seemed to stop. Tahano stepped forward, slow, calm, every movement calculated. "You found him." The man grinned like a wolf. "You remember Coleman? Sheriff's boy from Carson's Fork? You slit his throat 3 years back. Took a mare and a Winchester." Tahano didn't flinch. He shot a woman from back while she ran. "Doesn't change the price on your head." From behind the older man, another rider sneered. "Heard you bought yourself a white sow for a bride. That true? Ain't she the one they laughed out of Alder Creek?" Eleanor's jaw clenched. She didn't move, didn't blink. Tahano's voice dropped, quiet as a blade. "You say her name again and you won't ride away." The bounty hunter grinned wider, amused. "What, you sweet on her? Or just needed a body with weight to keep you warm at night?" Eleanor stepped forward then, before anyone could stop her. She walked until she was beside Tahano, her dress dust-streaked, hands still damp from creek water. She looked the man square in the eye. "She's not for sale," she said. The hunter laughed. "No one's buy-in, darling. We just come for blood." The standoff ended without violence, for now, but they left a message, as all men like them do. They'd be back before sundown the next day. No trial, no negotiation, just lead and rope. As the riders vanished into the valley, Eleanor turned to Tahano. "Is it true," she asked, "what they said about that boy?" Tahano didn't answer at first. Then, "Yes, I killed him," because he was laughing while she bled. Eleanor studied him. trying to find regret in his voice. There was none, only memory, like ash that still smoldered. "I don't need you to be gentle," she said, "but I do need you to be true." "I am," he replied. That night, the camp was silent. The children were moved to the far ridge, guarded by 2 young braves with bows strung and ready. Tahano cleaned his rifle in long, deliberate strokes, while Eleanor sat across from him, sharpening the bone-handled knife he'd given her weeks ago. He finally looked up. "You don't have to stay." "I do." He studied her. "This isn't your fight." She smiled, not soft but steady. "That's where you're wrong. They made it mine the day they laughed at me." She had spent most of her life trying to take up less space. Now, she took up all of it. She stood tall in her skin, no longer asking forgiveness for her size, her voice, her presence. Tahano nodded. A quiet agreement sealed between them. Later, under a sky choked with stars, he told her things he'd never said aloud. How his mother died coughing blood in a settler's barn because no doctor would come. How his father was scalped by a drunken cavalryman who mistook him for an Apache. How, for years, he tried to make peace between 2 worlds that never wanted him, only to find himself hunted by both. "You walk between," he said. "Like me, you know what it is to be seen and not wanted. That's why you carry it all on your shoulders." Eleanor's voice was a whisper, and you carry it in your silence. They didn't touch, not yet, but something in the air cracked open between them, like thunder rolling in the gutty earth. The next morning came too soon. The bounty hunters returned, 5 now instead of 4, guns drawn. No warning. The first shot hit the tree behind the fire pit. Splinters flew. A scream tore from the camp as people scattered. Eleanor didn't hesitate. She grabbed the rifle Tahano had set beside her and took cover behind the overturned cooking stones. Her hands trembled, but her eyes were sharp. She saw one of the riders circling toward the rear, trying to flank. Tahano shouted something in Comanche, then opened fire. The shot caught a man in the thigh. He howled, fell, crawled for his weapon. Eleanor steadied the rifle, aimed, and fired. The bullet struck the ground near the flanker's feet. A warning. He ducked, spooked, and retreated. Gunfire roared like thunder across dry hills. Tahano was grazed in the shoulder. Blood soaked through his sleeve, but he stayed upright, shooting with calm fury. Then the old man, the leader, broke through the brush, charging toward Eleanor, revolver raised. His mouth curled in a snarl, eyes blazing with recognition. "Should have stayed behind the stove, fat girl," he barked. She stood up, rifle empty. No time to reload. He didn't see the knife in her hand. She waited until he was close, too close to miss. Then she lunged. The blade sunk in just below his ribs. He staggered, eyes wide with shock, and fell to his knees. Blood gushed like spilled wine. Eleanor stood over him, breathing hard. Her dress torn, arms streaked red, but her eyes never wavered. She said nothing. There was no need. When it was over, when the dust settled and the last man had fled or bled out, she dropped the knife beside the old man's cooling body and turned to Tahano. He was kneeling, holding pressure to his shoulder. But when he saw her, he smiled. Not wide, not soft, but real. "You fought," he said. "I lived," she answered. For the first time, and in that silence between heartbeats, something inside her, the part always told to shrink, to disappear, stood tall and refused to bow again. The fire was low, casting a dim orange pulse across the blood-specked ground. Smoke curled into the dark like the last breath of something old. Tahano sat on a flat stone, his wounded arm wrapped tight in linen, the cloth already darkening. Eleanor knelt beside him, pressing a fresh poultice against the raw skin, her fingers steady despite the tremor still clinging to her bones. Neither had spoken since the last shot, not when the children were returned to the camp, not when the bodies were dragged beyond the ridge. The silence wasn't hollow. It was sacred, filled with the echo of what had nearly been lost. Tahano winced slightly as the salve seeped into the wound. Eleanor didn't pull away. "You should rest," she said. His lips curved, just barely. "You sound like a wife." She didn't smile, not yet. Her hands fell into her lap, and her gaze drifted toward the ravine where the wind had started to rise again. "They'll come back," she said. "Men like that always do. If not for you, then for something else." Tahano looked at her for a long while, as if measuring something deeper than time. "Then we go where they don't know us." She shook her head slowly. "There's nowhere like that. Just places where people ask different questions." He said nothing, but the firelight caught the edge of his expression, a flicker of thought, a silent weighing of futures. In the days that followed, they buried the dead with stone markers and fire rites. The Comanche women laid down feathers and ash beside the graves. Children brought small trinkets, dolls, buttons, seeds. Eleanor helped dig. She didn't ask permission. When the work was done, the elders gathered around the main fire. Tahano stood before them, tall despite the bandaged arm, his voice low but certain. "She fought beside me," he told them. "Not because she had to, because she chose to." The eldest among them, a woman whose face was folded with time and soot, turned to Eleanor. "You do not wear our blood, but you bled for us." Eleanor met her gaze and said, "I bled for what was mine." They gave her a shawl, dyed in earth tones, warm as firelight. It was not a title, not an adoption, but it was a welcome. Later, she stood outside the camp, watching the moon slip behind a cloud. Her hands were rough now, nails cracked, arms stronger than they'd ever been. But it wasn't her body that felt different. It was the weight inside her, heavier and quieter, like a seed that had finally rooted. Tahano joined her, wordless, their shoulders brushing. He held something in his hand, a thin leather cord, strung with carved bone and a single metal ring, dull by time. "My mother wore this," he said. "When they burned her village, it was the only thing that didn't melt." Eleanor looked at it, then at him. "She would have hated me," she said. "No, she'd have known you." He tied it around her wrist without asking. Not a gesture of ownership, but recognition. That night, they lay beneath the stars with no tent between them, no fire to keep warm but each other. Tahano spoke little, Eleanor even less, but when his hand rested against hers and her breath slowed beside his, the silence between them became something vast and complete. In the morning, the camp stirred with a decision to move. The earth here was poisoned by memory. Too many ghosts in the hills. Eleanor packed what little she had, a shawl, a knife, the rabbit charm from a boy who now followed her like a shadow. As she mounted the horse Tahano offered, she turned back once, to the ring of stones where the fire had burned brightest. She didn't feel sorrow, only a strange gratitude for what had died here. They rode east, toward plains painted in morning gold. Behind them, smoke rose one final time, a thin, quiet line against the sky. After a while, she asked, "Do you know where we're going?" Tahano said, "No." She nodded. "Good." The trail narrowed between two ridges. Wind whistled through the rocks like a song half remembered. Ahead, the horizon shimmered with heat and promise. Eleanor shifted in her saddle. The ring on her finger caught the sun, read, unpolished, unbreakable. She was no longer a bride traded like stock. No longer the girl mocked for her size or her silence. She was a woman forged by fire and fight. Chosen, not spared. Tahano looked over once. He didn't smile, but he didn't have to. She was beside him, and she was finally enough.